Yule is swiftly approaching, which is absolutely awful. My brain still thinks it should be July. It's already nearly mid-November. That's actually scary. So I wanted to get ahead of myself and talk about some of the plants that are associated with Yule. Now, for those of you who are new here, hi, my name is Hearth. I'm a practicing witch. For any of you that is a returning viewer, thank you so much for coming back. It really means a lot to me. Today, I wanted to dive into a range of different plants that are associated with Yule traditions. And let's have a look at why they're associated and the different ways that we can work with them within our own Yule magic and celebrations. Now, a lot of the things on this list you will very much recognize from other traditions, specifically Christmas. And that is because there's been a lot of back and forth borrowing here and there one way or another, and you ultimately end up with a lot of crossover. But let's look at some of the reasons why these are associated with the Yule season. I have a cowlick that is just incredibly shiny today, and it's just glowing. What is happening? Can I fix that? That looks weird. Okay, that didn't work. Up first, we have Evergreens. Now that is very, very vague, and it's very vague for a reason, because depending on where you are around the world, you're going to have slightly different plants. But what we're referring to here are those plants that don't lose their leaves during the winter months. They instead stay evergreen. Primarily, what we're looking at for this section though are conifers. These would be things like spruce and pine, the trees that you would typically associate with the Christmas tree. Now, while the traditions of the modern Christmas tree are, by today's standards, very modern, historically, evergreens were considered sacred because they were evergreen. That was really important when your world was very cold and very dark. I know that today we look outside when it comes to the winter solstice on December 21st to 23rd, depending on the year, and we think it's not really that cold and it's not really that dark, so why were people celebrating? And what we don't realise in our world that's lit by phones and streetlights, we have interior lights, we have heating, is that we don't really notice the change in the seasons and the change in light specifically like our ancestors once did. The winter solstice is the longest night and the shortest day of the year. It is the opposite of the summer solstice, which is the longest day and the shortest night, and this was a point to really celebrate. You've made it through the darkest part of the year, and from this point onwards, it's going to start getting lighter and brighter. And with that darkest time of the year comes a lot of feeling that it's never going to get any brighter. The greenery is never going to come back onto the trees again. It never feels like it's going to end. Many of us will experience this in the January-February period after all of the celebrations are over. And so having evergreens show that life is going to continue on even though it's dark outside was really, really important. They were often symbols of renewed and eternal life, cyclical changes, rebirth and death. And these factors were very significant to our ancestors, to whom death was a part of everyday life. And alongside all of these ideas also came prosperity and protection. And so it was a really useful time to be bringing this energy into the home because it would remind us that things are never truly lost, and it also helps bring in the protection and the prosperity that we're going to need as the growing season hasn't yet started. And especially if you are a follower of the modern Wheel of the Year, it is primarily based off harvest and seasonal festivals. And so the idea of abundance throughout the year is really at its lowest during this time. We're really struggling. There's not really that much going on. And so bringing that in the form of these plants is incredibly useful. Now, while you can bring in an entire Christmas tree, that isn't something that you have to do to be able to work with the energy. You can go out into nature if it's safe for you to do so and connect with the energy of these trees on a one-on-one basis or as a collective basis. If you work with tree spirits, tree allies, and tree energies, you can connect with them that way. You can then request their aid in spells and rituals. You can simply learn from them and develop a relationship with them, building a friendship with the trees. There's so many options when working with the tree spirits, but you can also bring that tree into your life to help it imbue energy into that space. So you can bring in an entire Christmas tree, or you can ask permission to take a leaf, or to take a small twig, or even a branch, depending on what it is that you are working with. But be sure to always be respectful to the tree and what the tree's answer is. If you ask and then do what you want anyway, there is absolutely no point in asking, and the tree is probably not going to want to help you. Now, if you are particularly crafty, you could create your own wreath to represent this cyclical energy out of evergreens, and you can also include in many of the other plants that I'm going to be talking about later on in this video to make a wreath really bright and really colourful and represent that eternal energy. But that could be a way of adding it into your family environment to get everyone involved, though not everything in this list is safe for that purpose. Or you can get your coven involved, or just a group of friends involved in making that wreath, or you can just do it as a solitary practitioner for yourself. They also make really nice gifts, so if you're a massive fan of giving gifts this Yule, that is one way that you can make it a handmade project. And you can also request aid from a tree by using a clootie. These are small pieces of fabric that are tied around a tree's branches with a wish attached to them. This is something that you add energetically. Now, I will say here that clooties can be very damaging to trees, especially if they are tied very, very tightly. They are made of synthetic, non-biodegradable materials, and they are also never removed. The tree can essentially struggle to grow past that clootie because it is on so tightly. And so if you're going to do this, I would recommend adding it to a tree out of a biodegradable material. You make sure it isn't overly tight, and you make sure that you do come back to that tree to remove it at a later point so that you can then protect the tree as well as the natural world as well. Now, conifers aren't the only evergreens out there. You also have holly, something that is very closely associated with Christmas and the Yule season. We hear about it in hymns and Christmas songs. We see it on postcards and Christmas cards. Holly is practically everywhere, and it is once again another protective plant that represents rebirth and the cycles of life, though for many within the pagan community, it actually represents a little bit more than that. The story of the Holly King and Oak King is often mentioned at this time of year, but people aren't often entirely sure what it represents or what's happening in the story. Twice a year, at the summer solstice and the winter solstice, so Letha and Yule, the Holly King and the Oak King fight, and they are fighting for control over the natural world. During Letha, the Holly King wins this battle and takes over from the Oak King. And then during the winter solstice, or Yule, the Oak King battles the Holly King again and succeeds. And this story is primarily used to represent the battling energy of that solar aspect. So we are seeing that from Letha, the sun begins to diminish, and this is the time of the evergreens. This is the time of the holly, where it's going to stay evergreen forever while the colours of the oak begin to change and shift and the leaves begin to fall off. And then from the winter solstice onwards, while the holly is still there, it's still ever present, the oak and the deciduous plants are going to start building in energy again, and they're going to start coming into flower, into leaf as we head towards Letha. And then the cycle is ever repeating. So you will see that both the holly and the oak are common themes during the Yule and Letha seasons for this exact reason. Now, holly is a highly protective plant, along with many plants that we see in the natural world that contain some kind of protective agent. Nettles are highly protective because of their sting. Brambles are highly protective because of their thorns. Rose can be used for the same purpose as can whitethorn and blackthorn, as can holly. Now, we often see it as a plant that we want to avoid, and in some parts of the world, holly is highly invasive, and it isn't something that people want to have in their gardens, and so it's often chopped down a lot. And so holly is commonly found, depending on where you are, around this time of year, as people are using it in Christmas decorations, in Yule decorations, so that it can be cleared out of woodlands to stop it from taking over any more than it already has. Though it is important to check the status of every plant that you work with in your local area to see if it is something that is endangered, if it is protected, if it is invasive, as well as if it is dangerous. Now, holly, when dried and brought into the home, is believed to offer protection from unwanted spirits, and so it's an ideal time to be bringing it in around this high energy environment where people might be coming and going quite a lot. You might be having visitors you wouldn't normally get, both human visitors and non-human visitors, and so having that additional bonus of holly is really useful. Now, it is said that if you are going to be bringing in holly or other evergreens into your home, mistletoe I wouldn't necessarily do this with, that once you are no longer in need of it anymore, you allow it to dry out and then you burn it in a safe, controlled way away from your property. I say away from my property not for the energy's sake, but mostly because dried plant matter can go up very, very quickly, and what I don't want is for someone to accidentally cause a fire. And this is another reason why I would always recommend getting rid of any evergreen trees that you have before they completely dry out, because they are a massive cause of house fires around the early January period. So if you do have a real tree, please be very, very careful of that. I wouldn't want anyone to have an accidental fire because of it. We then have holly's counterpart, ivy. Ivy can survive a lot. It climbs buildings, it climbs trees, it has a lot of negative associations with it, many of which are actually complete misconceptions, but it is incredibly durable. Sometimes it can outlive the tree that it's using as support, and so you end up with a living ivy wrapped around a dead tree. Now the ivy is only really using the tree as support, so the ivy itself is often, in many cases, depending on the variety, there's lots of nuances here, is not the one that is causing the death of the tree, it is simply using it as support. Ivy is once again used in representing life, death, and rebirth, the cycles and ever-changing nature of life, but it's also used in workings for fidelity, loyalty, love, and protection magic, as well as supporting the cycles of life and the powerful bonds between people. It is a very interlocking energy. We see this as it worms its way into cracks in buildings, and in some cases this can be damaging. So it's not that this plant can only be used for positive aspects, it can also be used for negative ones as well, depending on which aspects of its energy you want to focus on. And it's the reason why a lot of rings for loyalty are cast out of metal shaped like ivy leaves. It's very associated with this relationship energy, this companionship, loyalty, longevity of relationships. So it's one that's often been forgotten, but it can be incredibly useful, especially in love and relationship-based magic. Now, one that many of you will immediately recognise as being associated with Christmas and Yule is the mistletoe. The white berries and mirrored double leaves are something that is so recognisable. What I will say though is please be incredibly careful. Many people will have it in their homes during this time of year, but it is poisonous to both humans and dogs, and so it's something that you do not want to be consuming. Please do not leave pets and children unattended around mistletoe. I would hate for anyone to end up with a very expensive vet bill or a trip to the emergency room, or A&E as we call it here, for mistletoe consumption. But mistletoe has always been deeply connected with the Druids, and it was commonly harvested around this time of year with its connection to higher realms. The plant never touches the ground, and so it was always harvested with very close attention to never allow the plant, the leaves, the berries, or any part of it to touch the ground, or it would nullify the energy that you would want to be working with. Now we see people kissing under the mistletoe, and this is because it is considered a plant of peace. It's about reconciliation. It's about communication, it's about balancing out after arguments. And so it's often used in workings for reconciliation, communication, relationships, all of this kind of stuff where people might need to come together. And that might be one of the reasons why it's so closely associated with the Christmas period as well, because you've got families coming together, some of whom haven't seen each other for a long time. You've got reconciliations and arguments happening really often in high energy situations. So it can be useful to work with the energy of it during this time. Whether or not you want to bring any into your home, that is a different matter. But you'll often see it in trees. You see it a lot in Somerset, Devon and Cornwall a lot. If you look into the trees and you see something that looks like a very large bird's nest, it's almost certainly going to be mistletoe, and you see them in like giant balls, and one tree will have like 15 giant balls in the branches, and they are all mistletoe. And so a lot of farmers will cut the mistletoe out of their orchard trees, so their apple trees for cider making, and they will then sell the mistletoe on the side of the road or in farm shops around this time of year. So it's something that you can really easily get, just please be careful with it. Another counterpart to holly is that of oak. Now most people wouldn't necessarily think of oak as being a Yule tree, but the wood is often used in the traditional Yule logs, and so it's very much cemented itself into this time of year because of that, as well as its association with the Holly King and the Oak King. Oak is very much about stability and strength. It's durable through all times of year, all circumstances. It makes it a plant that is very useful to work with for protection and stability magic. And for some of you, myself included, oak might actually be your birth tree. That's going to be useful information in a minute. And so if that's the case, you can work with it in different forms. So this is oak incense, and as mentioned, for strength, stability, and nobility. It's very much a strong, durable plant. And not only that, but it is the home to a lot of mistletoe. And so it has connections to other plants in the Yule season as well, simply by its strong, enduring presence. And so if you need something to ground you at this time of year because the energy is quite heightened, there's a lot going on, oak might be the place to go. Now remember when I said that your birth tree might be particularly useful? The next tree is birch, and it might seem kind of counterintuitive. It doesn't seem at face value to have that much associated with Yule, but it is the next tree in the astrological calendar after the winter solstice, and therefore it is the first tree that you would want to be working with if you're just getting started on using the Celtic tree calendar. Now this is an adapted modern addition to practice, but I do think it is incredibly useful, and you might find if you are born around this time of year that birch is actually your birth tree, and then you can more deeply resonate and connect with it on that level. But birch is also very much a tree of fresh starts and new beginnings. When you have an area that has been deforested or it is being reclaimed back by nature, you'll find that at the very start you get the mosses and the lichens, you would get the low ground growing plants. You would then start getting nettles and brambles and bracken and the more bushy plants. And then the first tree to arrive in an area is usually birch. They grow quickly, they grow in high numbers, they are very vigorous, very new, and that's really what their energy is connected with. New starts, new beginnings, fresh growth, new drive, new potential, opportunities. And so this time of year, especially in the lead up to the new year for many people, it's a time where you might want to be working more closely with the energy of the birch. And also their beautiful silver birch is just gorgeous. And if you do want to start making your own broomsticks, birch is a very traditional plant to make the handle of your broomstick or besom out of. So it would often be a birch handle and then willow or broom bristles. The woods do vary depending on where you are around the world, but if that's something you have been thinking of doing, then perhaps forming a connection with birch during that tree's cycle, during this cycle of the Celtic tree calendar, could be incredibly effective. Now, following from the first tree in the Celtic calendar, we're then talking about yew. Now, yew is the last ogham in the Celtic tree alphabet, and it is a very, very sacred tree. We commonly see it found in holy sites and in graveyards as protection for the souls of the dead. And this applies not just in Christianity, but much further afield as well. Yew is a tree that is associated with life, death, rebirth, longevity, and the renewal of ever-present life. It is a very sacred tree to many, myself included. It is one of those trees that I would never ever want to damage because it is just so incredibly sacred and very interesting. It has a lot of mythology, a lot of stories. If you live in the UK, you'll likely know the story of Robin Hood, and it's believed that Robin Hood and Maid Marian were married under a very old yew tree in Derbyshire. They are some of the oldest trees in the world, some of which dating back to over 1,000 years old. And they're curious because if their low-lying branches dip and touch the ground, if they stay there for long enough, they'll actually root into the ground from the bottom of the branches, which allows one tree to start looking like many, many trees. They can grow to be massive in scale and are sacred to so many, especially those who follow a druidic path or those who work closely with the Ogham and Celtic trees. Yew wands can be very, very powerful, and actually wands made from any of the woods we've spoken about in this video can be incredibly potent, and yew is also used for protective magic, particularly protection of children from the things that go bump in the night. What I will say though is yew is incredibly dangerous to dogs and to actually most animals. It has sent many dog on a one-way trip to the vets, and I would not recommend having yew anywhere where you have pets. It is incredibly dangerous, not only to pets but also to humans as well. Now, we do have other things associated with the Yule season, such as frankincense and myrrh. These are really common resins that are used a lot in incense making. And so you can use these when you're doing incenses for the Yule season, for the winter solstice, offerings to different deities and spirits as well. This is really commonly used. You can use it as a focal point in your workings. They're really interesting materials to work with, especially when it comes to making incense, which is something that I use them for probably the most out of everything. And then we also have rosemary, another another one that's really commonly used to represent little tiny Christmas trees at this time of year, simply because of the way it's cut. It is also connected with the fiery energy of the sun. And so if you want to be focusing on the solar energy during the winter solstice and the Yule time period, then rosemary could be a good, easily accessible plant to work with, not only in your standard magical practice, but also in your kitchen witchcraft, because it's one of the only things in this entire video, maybe the only thing in this entire video, that you can actually eat. And so it could be useful to be incorporating it that way into your Yule traditions and celebrations. Now, the way you work with these plants is going to vary depending on your tradition and the way you style your practice. Some people are going to want to connect with the spirit of those plants and call upon them in spells and rituals, to leave offerings with the plants, to add cluties and wishes onto their branches. Some may want to include them into their magical practice and decorate their altar spaces in their home with it. You might want to meditate on the different energies of these plants to draw on them in your magical practice, use them as focal points in spells and rituals. If you don't have access to any of these plants, you might want to represent them using photographs or using representations. You might want to get a set of cards that has these images on them that you can then work with in your magical practice. For some, you might want to work with the oils and also the incense that is related to them, as well as a way of imbuing your magical arts with their energy without having to damage the plant in any way, or access them where you might have to ship them long distances in order to do that. You might want to be using them to create wreaths to work with your coven as a way of creating protections to add on to sacred spaces, whether they are your individual spaces or communal spaces. You might want to use them to add into workings for protection, new beginnings, new growth, new developments, creativity, abundance, the things that are developing and growing as the sun's duration begins to expand again. You might want to use them in prosperity workings or abundance workings to help get you through this darkest part of the year. You might want to be using them to resonate with the energy of the Holly King and the Oak King, or the solar energy that is so lacking at this time of year. There are lots of different options out there. Whatever you choose to use, make sure that you are respectful and make sure that you are always being safe. I would love to know, however, what plants you associate with the Yule season, because not everyone is going to be the same. These are the plants, minus frankincense and myrrh, they are definitely not from around here, but these are primarily the plants that you find in British folklore and ceremony, but that's not going to apply everywhere, so I would love to know what you use in your tradition, no matter where you are around the world. Even if you don't celebrate Yule, if you celebrate something different at this time of year, I'm really curious. I'd love to learn more, and I love getting to interact with everyone. So if you are still here, feel free to put little Christmas trees or little snowmen or little presents or something in the comment section, and I'm going to try to heart as many of them as I can. I still do this. I tried doing this. No, I'm sorry. What is that? That is not a heart. I don't know what that is, but no, that's a heart. That is how you do a heart. This? My fingers don't want to bend that way. Oh, Nope, I lost it. Anyway, never mind. I hope that you did enjoy this video. I hope you're going to have an amazing Yule. I know this is a little early, but I wanted to get it done. If you did enjoy it, feel free to give it a like. It means a lot to me. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to put them down in the comment section. And if you do enjoy the magical content on this channel or in this video, feel free to hit subscribe. I try to post magical content every single week. Whew, mouthful. And for anyone who's worried, they are fake candles. Don't worry, I'm not going to put real candles so close to my precious books. And with that being said, I hope you're staying safe. I hope you have a marvelous magical day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye! Oh, I'm getting in the Yuletide spirit already. I don't know what happened. As soon as Samhain went, like literally the day after Samhain, I got all of my faux candles. They arrived in the post, and I put them all over my house. And all of the Samhain decorations went away, and now I'm fully in the Yule season. We are here, baby. I don't know what happened. Something just clicked, and I went, you know what, I'm massively in the Yule season, which is so weird for me because usually I am absolutely not. It will be like a week before Yule, and I'm like, I'm still not feeling it. This year, though, it is cold, it is windy, it is wet. I bought a heated blanket to go on my bed, and now I never want to leave. And it feels so cozy this year. It feels so cozy. I cannot wait till I get to put my Yule tree up with all of my little decorations. I'm gonna go now because it is, what time is it? It is 6:10 and I need to go and get editing. So yeah, I'll see you in the next video. And I just realized I match. My hair matches my eyebrows. My eyebrow pen is the same colour as my eyeliner because I use the same thing. My lipstick is the same colour as my hair and the lipstick and everything else is the same colour as my shirt. So I just went very brown today, but I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. This was on, by the way, this entire time. Not that you can even really tell. I can't even turn it off now. Come on. There you go. You can't even really tell that was on. Okay, I'm gonna go and edit.